It is the deep middle of a winter night in the year 950, and you are wide awake in total darkness. You cannot see your own hand in front of your face. There is no switch to reach for, no glow of a screen, no street lamp bleeding through a curtain, because not one of those things exists yet, and will not exist for another 900 years. Beyond the timber walls around you, the sun went down in the early afternoon, and it will not climb back over the horizon until late in the coming morning. The night stretched out ahead of you is not 8 hours long. Where you live, in the far north, it is closer to 18, and here is the part that should stop you where you lie. You are not afraid, you are not bored, you are not aching for the dawn. You are simply awake, in the dark, in the dead middle of the night, and to you this is one of the most ordinary things in the whole of your world. To understand why, you have to lie back down on the bench where you sleep, pull the heavy wool up to your chin, and let this long Norse night close over you the way it closed over them more than 1,000 winters ago. Let me set you properly into this world first. The year is around 950. You live in the Norse lands, the long coast of Scandinavia and its scattered farms and trading towns, a place of fjords and cold lakes and dark forests, of turf-roofed longhouses breathing wood smoke into a grey sky. And you are not a warrior. Forget the raiders for a moment, because they were only ever a small and violent few. You are an ordinary person, a farmer, a weaver, a smith, a trader's wife, one of the great majority of Norse people whose real enemy was never another army but the winter itself. And the winter here is a serious thing. This far north the year does not simply grow cold, it goes dark. For weeks on end the sun barely lifts above the hills before sliding away again, and in the very far north of the Norse world it does not truly rise at all. In the southern Norse lands you might still get 6 or 7 grudging hours of grey daylight in midwinter. Push north into Norway and that shrinks to 3 or 4, and further still it vanishes altogether. Either way, the night swallows the greater part of every winter day, which means that sleep and darkness and the long hours between dusk and dawn were not some small corner of Viking life. They were a vast, cold country the Norse had to learn to live inside for half of every year. So how did they do it, and where exactly did you lie down? Begin with the rhythm of it, because the first thing the darkness did was decide when you slept. You did not stay up late, there was almost nothing to stay up for. Light, real usable light, was costly, and every hour you kept a flame burning after dark you were quietly spending fuel and oil that were hard to come by. So the day bent itself around the sun. You rose in the dark, you worked through the thin grey light while you had it, and when the light failed, so mostly did you. Going to bed early was not laziness, it was arithmetic. The dark was free, and staying awake in it was not. Now look at where you actually slept, because it is not what you are picturing. There is no bed frame in the middle of the room, no headboard, no bedroom door. Run your eyes along the walls of the longhouse instead. Down both long sides of the building runs a raised platform of packed earth and timber, lifted a little off the cold floor, wide enough to sit on, to work on, and to stretch out on. In your language these are the becker, the benches, and the set, the raised step, and they are the single most important furniture in the house. During the day this is where life happens. Women sit here to spin and weave, the family eats here, guests are seated along it in a strict and jealous order of honour. And then at night the very same benches become the beds. For most people there are no separate bedrooms at all, no private chambers, no doors to close. You do not go to your room. You simply lie down where you have been sitting and working all day, along the wall, in a long row with everyone else. The bench is chair and workbench and bed all at once, built into the very bones of the house. So what lies between you and that hard platform? Not nothing. The Norse were poor in many things, but they were rich in wool and hide and straw, and they piled all of it onto the sleeping benches. Beneath you would be a sack, or simply a loose heap, stuffed with straw or dried hay or heather or reeds, whatever the land around you gave, pressed down into a rough mattress. Over that, the hides, sheepskins with the fleece still on, cowhides, and for those who could get them the pelts of reindeer and bear, laid fur side up so the warmth pressed against your skin, and over you, wool, heavy woven blankets, and in the coldest homes simply more skins heaped on top, weighing you down and holding the heat in. We are not guessing at any of this. In the famous Oseberg ship burial in Norway, where two women were laid to rest inside a buried vessel around the year 834, archaeologists found actual beds, real carved wooden bed frames, and with them the remains of the bedding itself. And in that same grave they found something astonishing: more than 30 kilograms of soft down and feathers, the stuffing of duvets and pillows, sewn into cloth. 30 kilograms. That is a small mountain of feathers, the bedding of the genuinely wealthy, a luxury almost unimaginable to an ordinary farmer, because that is the other quiet truth of the Norse night. The higher you stood, the softer you slept. A great household lay on down and feathers, a poor one lay on straw and a single worn hide, and everyone, rich and poor alike, knew precisely which of the two they were. But whatever you lay on, you did not lie there alone, and I do not only mean the people. That warm straw mattress was a whole small world of its own. In an age before any of this could be helped, the bedding of nearly every household on earth was shared with fleas, with lice, and with bedbugs, tucked deep in the straw and the seams of the wool, waking as you warmed the bed. This was not a mark of the Norse being especially dirty. It was simply the condition of human sleep everywhere in this age, from the poorest farm to the king's own hall. The fine-toothed combs the Norse carried and treasured were fighting a battle that could be held back but never truly won. You made your peace with the small company in the straw, and you slept anyway, and you never ever slept alone in the larger sense either. This is perhaps the hardest thing for a modern person to feel in the body. In your world, the night is not private. Along those benches, in one long shared room, sleeps the entire household together. Your parents, your children, your grandparents, your unmarried brothers and sisters, the farmhands, the servants, the enslaved, and sometimes a traveller given shelter for the night, all of them stretched out in the same smoky dark, most of them within arm's reach of one another. There is no such thing as your own space, and in the deep of winter you may not even be alone with the humans, because the most precious animals, a favourite milk cow, a nursing ewe, the young beasts that might freeze to death in an open outbuilding, could be brought in under the same roof, their warmth and their breath and their heavy animal smell folded into the household through the coldest months. It sounds unbearable to us. To them it was survival, and it was ordinary, and it was in its own way warm. Bodies packed close throw off a great deal of heat, and in a house where the fire has burned down low by midnight, the simple animal warmth of the person, or the cow, beside you was not a discomfort to be endured. It was the thing that carried you alive to morning. And this closeness followed the Norse even when they left the longhouse behind. On the road, in a camp, or aboard a ship far from any hearth, a Viking slept rolled up in a hudfat, a great sack or bag of leather and hide, two people often sharing one, climbing inside against the cold and the wet with the sky itself for a roof. The bed changed shape, but the idea never did. You slept warm, you slept close, and you slept with someone. Now, do not imagine for a moment that because everyone slept in one room, everyone slept as equals. Nothing in the Norse world was equal, and the sleeping bench proved it as plainly as anything could. The best place, nearest the fire, out of the worst of the draught, warmest and most honoured, belonged to the master of the house and his wife. In the grandest halls this went further still. A few great households had what the sagas call a lokrekja, a bed closet, an actual small enclosed and lockable chamber built against the wall, a wooden box of a room where the lord and lady could sleep behind a door, screened off from the crowded benches, in warmth and a rare scrap of privacy. To have a door you could close on the night was, in this world, a staggering mark of status. The vast majority never had it, and never expected to. Where you slept in the longhouse, how near the fire, how far from the cold door, on down or on straw, behind a wall or out in the open row, was a map of exactly who you were. Your place in the household was quite literally the place you lay down. Now let the fire sink lower, and let us talk about the dark itself, because the dark was the true ruler of the Norse night. You think of darkness as something you can banish in an instant. A Viking had no such power. Light, real light, was expensive. The hearth fire in the centre of the floor gave warmth and a low red glow, but it was fed with precious wood, and it was banked down low overnight so that it would not burn the house down or waste fuel while everyone slept. Beyond the fire there were small lamps, shallow bowls of carved soapstone filled with fish oil or rendered animal fat, a twist of moss or flax floating in them for a wick. But that oil was very nearly food, and that fat was precious, and no one squandered it lighting an empty room in the middle of the night. So when the household lay down, the last light went out, and what closed over the longhouse was a blackness deeper and more complete than almost anyone alive today has ever known. And in that blackness, the Norse were not entirely at ease. This was a people who believed the dead did not always stay in the ground. They told in low voices of the draugr, the again walker, a corpse that would not rest, heaving itself swollen and blackened and horribly strong out of its own grave mound to stalk the night and torment the living. They believed the long dark hours belonged partly to things that were not human at all. To lie awake in a Norse house in the small hours was to lie awake in a world where the darkness was not empty, and where every single person breathing around you believed the very same thing. Which brings us at last to the strangest possibility of all, and to the reason you are awake at the very start of this story. For much of human history, and across a great deal of pre-modern Europe, there is real evidence that people did not sleep the way we now do, in one solid unbroken block from night until morning. Instead, they may have slept in two. The historian Roger Ekirch spent years combing through old letters, diaries, court records, prayers and stories, and he found the same pattern surfacing again and again in thousands of references across many languages and many centuries. People spoke, quite casually, as of something everyone understood, of a first sleep and a second sleep. They lay down not long after dark, slept deeply for several hours, and then woke, naturally, sometime after midnight, and they stayed awake for an hour or even two in the quiet dark. They tended the fire, they murmured to the person beside them, they prayed, they thought, they made love, they rose to check the animals, or they simply lay still in the stillness. And then, when that waking hour had run its course, they sank down into a second sleep until dawn. Now we must be careful and honest here, because honesty about the past is the whole reason this channel exists. We have no diary from a Viking farmer describing his two sleeps. The clearest written evidence for segmented sleep comes largely from later centuries and from other corners of Europe, not from the Norse themselves. So this is not a proven fact about the Vikings. It is a strong and reasonable possibility, but consider how perfectly it would fit their world. When your night is not 8 hours long, but 16 or 18, you physically cannot sleep straight through all of it in a single piece. No human body can. A night that long almost pushes itself into two halves, with a wakeful island in the middle. And so the very thing a modern person panics about, waking in the dead of night and lying there unable to fall straight back to sleep, may have been for the Norse simply the middle of a long night doing exactly what the middle of the night was always meant to do, and that is the quiet revelation hiding inside this whole long darkness. We have been taught to pity the pre-modern night, to picture it as a black, cold, frightening emptiness that people merely endured until the blessed light bulb came along and rescued them from it. But turn the picture over, that vast 18-hour Norse winter night was not empty at all. It was full. It was full of bodies pressed together for warmth, full of the low talk between two people awake in the dark, full of the fire being quietly tended, the animals shifting and breathing, the old stories passed in a whisper, the first sleep and the second sleep and the strange, peaceful hour that lay between them. The darkness they could not banish, they simply moved into. They built an entire way of living inside it. And the thing we now reach for a switch to destroy the very instant we feel it closing in, the deep and total dark of a long winter night, was to them not an enemy to be defeated, but a country to be inhabited, half of every year, for the whole of their lives. So the next time you wake in the small hours and lie there in the dark, certain that something has gone wrong, that you ought to be asleep, that the night is somehow failing you, think of that longhouse. Think of the year 950, the fire banked down to a dull red glow, the wool lying heavy on your chest, the breathing of a dozen people, and a warm cow in the black all around you, and the sure and settled knowledge that you are not broken and nothing is wrong, that you are only awake in the middle of a very long night, exactly as you were always meant to be. Before you turn over, pull the hide a little higher, and slip down without a shred of fear into your second sleep. They did not sleep less than we do. In the long dark of the north, they may well have slept more and deeper and closer than almost anyone alive today. So here is what we would truly love to hear from you. Which of these surprised you the most? the whole household and its animals sleeping in one long row along the walls, the more than 30 kilograms of feathers in a rich woman's grave, or the quiet possibility that the Vikings, like so much of the old world, may have slept the night in two halves with a waking hour in between? Tell us in the comments below, because the real people of the past are almost never who the legends say they were, and the night that we have spent a whole century learning to fear and to flood with electric light was, to them, simply the other half of being alive.